Hello fellow Psychonauts, today I'm excited to celebrate Interbeing Art channel reaching 2,500 subscribers. I can't believe we're at 250,000 subscribers. That is just unbelievable. So in order to celebrate, I wanted to do a Q&A and answer some of the questions left on some of my videos. Usually I wait to the end of the video to say this, but I think for this occasion I really wanted to start off by saying thank you so much to all my viewers, subscribed and not subscribed, and especially to my patrons who help this channel keep going and helps keep food on the table. So without further ado, let's get to some of these comments. I love your content, man, but I can't imagine why you value salvia at all. It seems utterly useless in comparison to tryptamines. This comment is a variation of one that I get very often, is why bothering focusing on salvia when it's obviously not the preferred psychedelic, it's not the most desirable one objectively. I would like to counter that by saying that I like to focus on atypical topics, and salvia is an atypical substance. Psychedelics is a niche subject, but my tendency is to go into the niche of the niche. If everybody's talking about DMT, I'm probably going to be talking about salvia. If everybody started talking about salvia, I'd probably start talking about something else. It's just kind of how I do. But with all that being said, salvia has a lot going for it. It can be euphoric, it can feel very nice to do. Salvia do what other psychedelics don't. Agonizes a completely different and separate receptor system in our brains, which is interesting on quite a few levels. But mainly what's interesting to me about it is that you can have psychedelic experiences that don't involve the serotonin receptors. Not only that, but salvia experiences are just so radical. Like, oh my god. Like, obviously be careful. I will make more videos about safety in the future, but if you take all the necessary precautions, man, is it rewarding. It is just really good. Obviously not for everyone, but you know, neither is my channel. How do I get into salvia with respect? The way to approach salvia with respect is by doing the research to how the drug is administered, what you think will be best for you, and also respecting yourself and your surroundings. Doing salvia without respect would look like being prompted out of the blue in an uncomfortable place, so you don't really want to be in like a public place or around with friends that you don't, or acquaintances that you don't know very well. Honestly, I don't think you have to like pray to any like supernatural deities or anything like that in order to be respectful of this substance. Respect to me is just having the research done, knowing what the effects are for each administration method. Whether you're doing a quid or smoking, you might want a different setup. And in terms of intentions, I think it is perfectly fine to just have curiosity as an intention, just to see what this thing can do and what experience unfolds from it. Respecting the substance is also respecting yourself, so just being careful. A lot of these horrible sounding trips you'll find are because of lack of preparation, not in the proper setting. Don't know what this substance entails. I know for me, I had a pretty good understanding of it, but something I did wrong was that I thought you had to do it sort of like DMT, where you had to take the 3 big hits in order to have the full-blown experience. And the full-blown experience can be very jarring, and so that's why I recommend now that you incrementally smoke a little bit more or quit a little bit more at a time. Quitting is not as intense, but smoking comes on so fast and so intensely, it is really worth it to do baby steps. You might not feel a lot in the first steps, but it's a lot better than feeling everything immediately. Because if you take it slow, you might not like the experience, you might find it uncomfortable, but because you're going slow, it won't be so overbearing, and you will recognize early on that it's just not the type of thing you want to experience. And that's okay. You don't have to experience every psychedelic, you know? What is the problem if I smoke salvia with tobacco every day? Nothing. Low dose salvia is actually really great, and it's nothing at all like the salvia trips you read. It's pretty euphoric and relaxing. I notice when I take it at low doses, my voice register lowers. It just like really relaxes things, and it doesn't last long. It's pretty enjoyable. I personally don't really like tobacco, but you know, hey, why not? There's no evidence or research to suggest that daily salvia use is detrimental. Although because there isn't research on it yet, maybe just be a little bit cautious about that. I can't advocate one way or another. Has anyone noticed the physical feeling? It's like every increment of measurement of my body is moving. Everything has the strange tingle feeling. I love salvia. Yes, this is known as the kinesthetic effects, or the tactile hallucinations. When we think of hallucinations, we think visually. We see something that isn't there, but you can have all sorts of hallucinations. If you have a sense, then you can have a false sense. Salvia, as we know, agonizes the kappa opioid receptors, which creates a very tingly sensation over your body, which leads to a lot of hallucinations involving stabbing or being like ripping or being slapped. If you do it at lower doses, the tingly sensations can actually be pretty pleasant. If you out of the box do 40x or something like that, or take a really big dose of 20x, then those tingly sensations can be quite painful. Again, that's why baby steps is necessary. I wonder if people who smoke salvia before things like zippers and conveyor belts were invented would see such things in their trips. I would suggest that there would be a variation of those archetypes, maybe like a proto-archetype, if you will. Before there were zippers, the hallucinations were probably more along the lines of ripping or something else relevant to the space and time and the culture that that person was tripping in. Maybe a conveyor belt would be instead a mudslide or something like that. Yeah, I don't think people were hallucinating zippers before zippers were invented. And also, a lot of people in the original context of salvia, they spoke of archetypes like the shepherdess, but they did not speak about zippers. So those archetypes would be represented by something more akin to that culture in that space and time, or something previously in the awareness of the individual. With no sitter available, do you think locking myself up with some chain and lock to bed would be a good idea? Terence McKenna advocated for this, or said that it wasn't really a bad idea and that he did it. Personally, I think this is a bad idea. I could see why somebody on a substance like salvia might want to, because like I was saying before, it could be very jarring, and there's no mechanism that causes paralysis or anything like that, kind of like with DMT. People do tend to run around on salvia, or can do that. But I think that has a lot to do with the shock of smoking a lot of salvia at once. If you do it incrementally, then your body kind of gets used to it. I think smoking a lot really makes your brain and consciousness freak out, and the body wants to try to escape the experience or try to run away, not really understanding what's happening. So I think a better technique is just going slow. I doubt your body will freak out as much. Because the problem with locking yourself up, as practical as it might seem, if your body is freaking out and wants to escape the experience, anything like chain or rope that you've tied yourself down on will feel extremely constricting. I remember when I smoked salvia, I smoked a lot, and I had a sitter to make sure I didn't fall off the bed. And I had a similar freak out where I didn't run around, but I almost fell off the bed. But immediately I had to take off my shirt and stuff because I was getting very overheated. There's a very physical sensation. So it's something like your shirt will start to feel a lot differently after you smoke salvia. It could feel very irritating. And I can only imagine how irritating and constricting being tied down would feel. It probably would make for a pretty bad trip, in my opinion. Is salvia like colored ketamine? That's actually a pretty good way of putting it. Salvia, like ketamine and DXM, is a dissociative substance. Although it has the added quality of producing visual hallucinations. So a lot of these hallucinations, such as time skipping or jumping, or frames kind of breaking down or feeling out of your body, are also present with DXM and ketamine, which tends to lend toward the idea that it is manipulating our brain's processing and not like a choreographed trip designed by some deity. But yeah, I would say there's a lot of crossover in terms of the effects of DXM, ketamine, and salvia. A lot of people try to argue that salvia is not a psychedelic because it's a dissociative, but it can be two things at once. You can have a psychedelic dissociative. It's totally possible. That's what salvia is. It's probably best described as that. Here's an example of someone saying, I see the zipper on Dex. There you go. For me, as absurd as it may sound to some, natural occurring psychedelics are really the only tangible element left to us by the gods, tethering us to the divine realms. I really appreciate this comment and the compliment, although I do have to say I disagree. This is an idea I used to have as well, being a big fan of Terence McKenna, and Terence McKenna being such a heavy advocate of natural psychedelics or natural hallucinogens. But we have to consider a few things. There are unnatural psychedelics that are amazing. Non-natural psychedelics such as DMT or LSD that have to be synthesized, in my opinion, just equally as amazing as anything found in a plant. Even though I know that to some degree DMT and LSD are naturally occurring, I just disagree with this idea that if it occurs naturally, then it's divine. I'm straying away from the whole notion that these plants were given to us by divine presences, especially seeing how analogs of Salvinorin A, for example, have been shown to have equally awesome and profound hallucinatory effect. It seems like it's just a bias to me. Substances like LSD or other research chemicals can be just as profound. There's a lot of chemicals out there in the natural world. Some of them will kill you, some of them will nourish you, and some of them might give you some pretty fucking wicked hallucinatory effect. It concerns me that acetone is involved in the salvia extraction process. I don't have too much knowledge about this. The process of synthesizing drugs often involves using dangerous chemicals. DMT is another example. You need to use naphtha and lye, both of which you do not want to consume. But by the end of the process, if it's cleaned sufficiently, then there should not be any remnants of those harmful substances. In this case, if it was acetone, you would know because when you try to light your salvia, it would fucking flame up. I don't think there's any acetone remnants left on salvia by the time you get it, and if there are, it would probably be so minuscule that it wouldn't affect you very much at all. Where do I get this? I'm curious. Straight up, just Google it. Why am I more interested in salvia than NMDMT? Something about salvia feels like you are peering into the alternate theaters of consciousness. Even though it's terrifying, it has nothing to do with the human experience. Yeah, a few things there. It's not totally unusual for people to prefer salvia over DMT. It's really just preference of like what archetypes excite you, what sensations you feel comfortable with, and whether smoking one substance over another is more enjoyable for you. I would say NMDMT is worth it if you do like salvia. I found that there was a tremendous crossover in the sensation in terms of the theater of consciousness thing. The DMT trip I had felt almost like a continuation of the salvia trip. It didn't feel like they were completely different worlds. There was definitely differences in terms of the sensations and the quality of the visions. Feels like it's a Venn diagram with a lot of crossover, even though they use totally different receptor systems. This comment that it has nothing to do with the human experience, that's where I would disagree, because I think this shows a completely different side of the human experience that is kind of covered up by our consciousness. A lot of our brain's processes we are not made aware of, and I think these substances simply make us aware of other things that are happening in our brain, although they're also altered by the substance at hand. It's not a drug, it's a herb. You know, it can be both, right? I think it's really sad when people try to say that things like weed or pot, for example, aren't drugs because, I don't know, maybe they try to argue that it's not addictive or not harmful. But I really don't think this is the right approach. This comes from the fear-mongering of the war on drugs propaganda of the last few decades. People associate drugs with bad, drugs with harmful, and that's just not the case. Drugs can be harmful, and you can have good or bad experiences on them. But whether a mind-altering substance is harmful or not has nothing to do with the fact that it is a drug. A drug is a mind-altering substance. And yeah, you can argue all substances alter your mind at some degree, but at a certain point, you have to recognize that the mind-altering effects is so strong that you cannot deny that it is a drug. And yeah, salvia and weed, they're definitely drugs, but that doesn't make it a bad thing. And yes, they're also herbs. Are you a salvia being? Is this video even real? Yes and no. Alien? Yes. Feels like it, man. Hey man, I just wanted to thank you for making the psychedelic community feel more chill. You're welcome, and thank you. Why am I stoned watching this? How did I get here? YouTube algorithms, man, I don't know. And you know, if a drug is a mind-altering substance, I am a substance. I'm altering your mind by talking to you. If I make you feel high, that's good. How do I make you feel? Okay. Haven't even watched the vid. Datura has archetypes? No, it doesn't. My friends and I are huge psychonauts, but none of us feel alienated from society or dress abnormally or anything like that. Not knocking it, but I'm just pointing out that psychedelics aren't far from the mainstream in a lot of places. I went to a conservative southern college, but literally all the frat guys I knew would buy acid and shrooms multiple times a year. It's not too crazy of a thing for a lot of areas. I never made the point that psychedelics inherently dissolve boundaries or inherently challenge ideologies. I say they have a tendency to do that, and they can do that. I think this quote from Terence McKenna really puts it elegantly. Yeah, you can do a shit ton of acid or every psychedelic and not have your mind changed at all. You have to have an open mind when going into these experiences. Imagine going into a museum where there was no infographics with each piece. You would just look at each piece and just basically have a experience. It wouldn't really change your life or really challenge your preconceived notions. It's just, or that looks neat. And a lot of people see these trips as just that. It's just a neat trip. And therefore, they don't really go into it trying to learn or challenge their belief systems. Looking at the 1960s movement, that the counter-cultural movement of the hippies and the anti-war movement was largely fueled by acid and then therefore influenced music and politics so vastly, I think we can infer that on a large scale, if a lot of people did psychedelics, a lot of ideological components of our culture will start to be dissolved and things will change rapidly, but not inherently. There are people in Silicon Valley, spiritual entrepreneurs who go down to South America and get a shaman just to try to find the next business idea, you know, so they don't inherently dissolve your previously conceived notions. Man, I wish they could. So we can't be too deterministic when it comes to psychedelics or substances. They don't inherently do this or that. We're just talking broadly here. Science is so limited, and I live by science, but we have to move forward. What about weird experiences in life? What about weird miracles? We have to wonder what's going on. Yeah, I want to be clear that it's absolutely fine to wonder what's going on. Nobody really has all of the answers. And I don't claim that science has all the answers either. That's actually called scientism. I'm not trying to be a reductionist when I advocate for materialism over mysticism. I think you can read a lot about spirituality and metaphysics. You can get a lot of insight from it. It's very interesting, it's super aesthetic, it's all very good and fine. However, when it comes to the more concrete facts, we need to be able to back that up with proof. And thus far, science is the only thing that really has that proof. Science was born out of philosophy, but now even philosophy has to have the backing of science in order to be relevant. My problem with metaphysical thinking, I don't know what its basis is. Like, I could just say a bunch of things. Unless you have those data-driven analyses, then it's not science and it's not going to answer our questions. And in terms of what we put our faith into, I'm skeptical of everything. Even when there's like a hard science, there is always going to be a degree of skepticism there. But I'm much more likely to believe something that's been rarefied by experts who are researching these things, who can conclusively say, this is the data we have found and all this data supports each other. I'm much more likely to believe something like that than I am some stoner on a hill saying that they figured out all the answers, because again, where's the proof? I need proof. I'm a skeptical person. I'm not gonna just believe something because it resonates with me or that I think it sounds nice. Cat dude, my guy, how's your cat who resembles Church from Pet Cemetery treat you when shrooming? Well, to be honest, one is that I don't live with that cat anymore from this video. I do miss him a lot, but yeah, I do have another cat, thankfully. And the other thing is that I've never actually tripped on shrooms around my cat. My cat needs to become a certain age before I start to have the drug talk with them. That's all the energy I have for these comments for now. If you liked me doing a Q&A, I'm willing to do another one in the near future, maybe in a few months. So leave any questions you have for me down in the comments below. If there's any more personal questions or drug-based questions or political-based questions, I'm down to answer it all. I really appreciate your engagement, and I really hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you learned something, or if not, just enjoyed your time. If you haven't already, if you're a viewer that watches these videos and hasn't subscribed, I really appreciate if you did subscribe, because it's a free way to really help out this channel. So yeah, like this video if you liked it, and if you didn't like this video, please dislike it and write me a lengthy rant. Anyways, trip safe everybody, research your substances. I hope you all are doing okay. Take care of yourselves. Until my next video.